time when I'm like in my brain, so I'll try to be better on that. Let me pray for us. Thank you, Father, for another opportunity to just go deep into the history, the modern thought, the ancient thought of your word, of your holy word. Help us to find the balance of studying things that are somewhat extra biblical, but still valuing and enjoying their what they bring to the truth of your word. Because as we understand these extra things, really just extra things, they make all of the things that you knew when you were writing these things so much more full and beautiful, and we want to be knowledgeable. You are the God of all knowledge. You're omniscient. You know all things, and our desire is to be like you, not to imagine that we can know all things, but to be wise and understanding and knowledge, and not be ignorant about what we believe. This is something that we have to give ourselves to. And so I pray that you would bless us tonight as we gather together to learn more about you. Would your Spirit please connect the intangibles, those pieces that maybe I'm missing or not putting together right? Would you connect them and make those light bulbs go off in our minds so that we can love you more? And because to know you is really to love you. And so the more that we know about you and how you work and what people say and think about you, it makes us love you more. So bless our time. Please bless our time. We ask you these things in Jesus' name. And everyone said? Amen. 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 Well, I got a lot of unhappy comments. I did cut the audio when we started talking about some of that crazy stuff last week, and people weren't happy that I did that. So it turns out we have people watching. So if you're watching, I will not cut the audio again. Let me preface tonight by saying I'm going to give you a lot of information, a lot of really big, fancy words and thoughts and arguments and stuff. And some of it may not make any sense to you as we're going over it. But what I've learned is the best process for me as I learn is as I hear things and take things in, I get big pictures. I take the big picture, and then from that big picture in the study or in the service or in the class, I go home and I do my own study and I do my own research and I do my own looking and checking, and I do like the Bereans, studying to see if all these things are true. So I encourage you, that will be the best way that you will really learn and understand these things and have them become valuable and practical in your life by taking them and, not trying to just understand everything tonight, but taking some of it in, and then things that you're not sure about, maybe just put a highlight or a check mark to or a question mark or whatever, and then doing your own study and going deep in your own time with the Lord. So let me preface with that. And then I also wanted to jump right into like all of the secular thought as it pertains to creation. But I felt like the Lord led me back to us needing to begin at square one before we get into, a few blocks down the road. So we have to begin by understanding why we believe what we believe about God, why we're theists, people who believe that God is someone. So that's what a theist is, theo. It comes from God. And so we are theists. We believe in God. And the opposite of that is a what? Atheist. They don't believe in God. No God. They're atheists. And so with each one of those designations comes two other designations. If you're a theist, you're most likely a creationist. And if you are an atheist, you are most likely a naturalist. So it's important for us first to come to the understanding of why we are creationists, and first we have to understand why we're theists. Why do we believe in God? So I wanted us to begin by looking at some of the very classical, you can look this up, the 4 or 5 classical arguments for the existence of God. This starts to get into a little bit of philosophy and stuff like that, but the incredible thing about these arguments is you use them frequently. You just don't recognize that you do. When you're communicating with your friends and your family about God, when you're hearing me teach about why God is and why he exists and all these things, I'm touching on a lot of these themes. You're just not recognizing them for what they are. So I thought tonight would be a good place to start there. And then as I was even in my own study time and I jumped into the secular side of it, I realized that, having spent all that time understanding God, it answered so many of the broken understandings that the secular side has, that the atheist side has, that the naturalist side has. And so that's where we're going to begin tonight. We're going to begin by first talking about 2 of the 4 belief systems. So there's 4 total belief systems about how you see the world. And the first one is that you're a theist. That's the one I just said. You believe in God. A naturalist is that you believe that this matter, material, the natural state of things, that is what is. You can also be a deist. A deist is like it's a belief that there is a God, but you can't know him. And we're not going to get into that tonight. We can eventually. That's kind of some of the stuff that Paul addresses. He addressed some deistic thought. So we're not going to get into that tonight. And then there's also pantheism. You can be a pantheist, and that is where you believe that God is in everything. And that's where you're going to get like a lot of Eastern mysticism, a lot of Eastern religions, a lot actually of the New Age metaphysics, spirituality. That's a lot of pantheism. They believe God is in energy and flowing through everything, and that's where all that. So those are deists and pantheists, and we're not going to look at them tonight. We're going to focus on theism and naturalism. Those are the 2 that we're going to look at tonight. And so if you guys on another day you want me to go into deism and pantheism and Eastern religions, and maybe that could just turn into a studies of the cults classes, that'll be a really good study. So we can do that. But for tonight, our focus will be theism and naturalism, okay? Okay, so then after we deal with these arguments for the existence of God, then we'll move into the creation understandings from those viewpoints or those belief systems, those worldview systems, okay? So there are 4, kind of like 4.2, I guess, depending on how, I'm going to confuse you if I do it like that. I'll just say that there are 4. One of them has 2 parts to it, but there are 4 classical arguments for the existence of God, okay? 4 classical arguments for the existence of God. The first one is called the ontological argument from highest ideal. And is this on? I have a, if I can airplay to this, I have a little slide that at least so you can see the words. So I don't have to okay, but ontological, ontological, ontological argument from the highest ideal, okay? The next one is the teleological argument from design, teleological, teleological argument from design. Let me see if I can airplay to this. Will it let me? Oh, I think I can. Is this going to work? Are you guys seeing my screen? Yes. Wonderful. That's great. There we go. Let me do this instead. I'll use it as a separate display, and then I can turn this on. Hold on here. Are you guys, hold on, wait. Is it there? Hey, now. Okay. I know. I'm going to make it bigger. Hold on. Where is it? Where's my arrow? Okay. Oh no, what did I do? Missed it. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to have to go off of this. I really don't want you to go off of that. I just want you to, some of the bigger words and some of the ideas, it'll just help you. Can I control it with my... Oh, I need to send it into play mode, huh? Is that better? Oh, but see, then it takes over my screen on this side. Yeah, it takes over my screen on this side. So that won't work. Well, I'll open it up when I get to them so that you guys can see. But at least you have that for now. Okay. So we have ontological argument from highest ordeal, teleological argument from design, and then the third one is going to be the cosmological argument from first cause. You guys didn't know that you were going to get tongue twisters tonight, did you? Cosmological argument from design. And then you're going to get the axiological argument from morality. Okay? So that's 4 of them. This is the ontological argument. This is what you're looking at here. And this is the reasoning of how it works. But don't... the axiological, AXIOLOGICAL, argument from morality. Okay? So those are the 4 arguments for the existence of God. Okay? Don't worry, I'm going to explain them all. Remember, we're wanting to at least get some groundwork on arguments to understand why we are theists, why we believe that God is, so then when we get to verses like, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, you have a reason to believe that God exists. Does that make sense? So this is like first step, building block, okay? All right, we'll format our path through these this way. I'll lay forth the idea and maybe a little bit complex, and then I'll try to reduce it and simplify it using these little graphics by explaining a simple way that the argument works. And then we'll discuss a little bit to make sure that you guys are understanding how it works, okay? All right, you guys ready? All right, so the first one is the ontological argument from highest design, okay? This is the most confusing one. This is definitely the hardest one, and they get much easier and much more fun to like bring up. But the first one, it's called the ontological argument from highest ideal, and it was started by a philosopher. His name was Anselm of Canterbury. I don't know if you want to know that. And it's called ontological because ontos means being. It means being, like to be, to exist, to be. And it tries to prove God's existence by explaining that humans, no matter where they are, or where they were born, or at what place in history they existed, they always come up with some idea of God. Does that make sense? So whoever, they always, and this is kind of the crazy thing about it, they come up with the idea that God doesn't exist. But somehow the idea of God is in their mind. Does that make sense? That's like the question, like an atheist. Like, what is an atheist? Why would you need an atheist if your whole thought process is built upon something that doesn't exist? Does that make sense? How could you be a not God believer if you don't believe that God exists? You have in your mind an idea that God exists, and you want to argue that he doesn't exist. If you didn't believe he existed or was a thing, you would leave us alone and let us do our own thing, right? So this is kind of where this argument gets its footing in. The argument goes on to say human minds can only conceive that which exists, and so God himself must exist. Let me ask you to think of something that doesn't exist. What doesn't exist? Pink elephant? Well, actually, a pink elephant exists right there because you said it. Okay? Give me something that doesn't exist.
Whatever that thought is that doesn't exist.
Give me one.
I don't know.
You can't.
Something you haven't thought of.
It's because it doesn't. If something that does not exist cannot be thought of. This is the point of the argument. Something that doesn't exist can't be thought of. Yet if it does exist, that if it can be thought of, then it exists. Does that make sense? It's a lot of like cyclical, but if you ever get into some fun little arguments with people, you can be like, how do you know that God even exists or what he is? Well, I mean, I read all these things and people say all these things. So doesn't that mean some form of him or something that he is must exist? If you can actually think about him and his characteristics and his attributes, yeah.
When I think of the atheists,
Mhm.
they must somehow believe that there's a God.
It-
Because why would they argue against there
That's
is
the
no
whole
God?
point of this argument. Like you understand the concept of this argument just fine, because you understand if someone is going to say that something is not, then they have to understand that they have to hold in their mind that it is. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? I know this is kind of flipping your brain a little. This is the most confusing one to kind of wrap your brain around. It's kind of like a chicken and an egg. Like, wait, how do I not think of something that not is? If you can't think of it, then it isn't. But if you think of it, then it is. Okay, so, this guy, Anselm, he came up with this theory, this argument for the existence of God based off of Exodus chapter 3, verse 14, where God says, I am that I am. I am. And that's it. We hear secular philosophers say, I think, therefore I am. God makes his own statement of that, and he says, I am that I am. I am what I am. I am however you interpret that. But that is him making the statement and the declaration that he exists, if that makes sense. If he didn't say anything, then we wouldn't have to worry about his existence. But the fact that he speaks and is, then we have to take into account his existence. Does that make sense? I know this one's a little confusing, but we're going to have fun after this, I promise. Okay. And like I said, it's the same concept. It's an atheist says they do not believe in God. And yet if they didn't believe in God, then why would they think it necessary to say that they don't believe in God? The fact that they say that they don't believe in him is a fact that he exists. You don't have to believe in him, but he is. Does that make sense? Think about it.
Well, he exists to other people, so that's why they're acknowledging it.
Okay. But if he didn't exist to them, why would they acknowledge it at all? If it is a non-measure in their own mind, then why do they find the need to say it and counter it at all? Yes?
So it's more not, for them, it's really not a question of whether he exists, it's just that they don't believe in him.
So I wholeheartedly believe, I've been saying that so much, and I told my wife I have to stop wholeheartedly. I don't know why I keep saying that. I believe that very much of the atheist thought is built in a deeper psychology of frustration with God, frustration with circumstance, frustration with the way things are, or their situation, or what they are. It goes deeper than just the basic thought of you really don't believe in God. There's a reason why you do not want to believe in him, but you believe in him. That's what I hold very often when I'm finding myself communicating with atheists. I try to get to the root of why do you feel the need to fight so hard against something that you don't have to even acknowledge if you don't believe in it, and why do you feel so strongly to tell me and break apart my understanding and knowledge or recognition of God? There's something in their psyche, in their psychology, that is telling them, I need to stop this affront against. Usually you find that there's something in their past that frustrated them about God. They're unhappy with their circumstances. There's some abuse or trauma. At the foot of it is this idea maybe, or religion or God. And so they lump it all together and say, well, I don't believe in God because a good God wouldn't do this, or a good God. This is...
I explained to someone
Mm.
just this past weekend that being a Christian
Mm.
is not a religion,
Mm.
you know? And
Yeah.
I really had a hard taking that concept.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, we're not a religion, we're Christians.
Mhm.
You know, as we're Christ followers. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not a religion in itself. Religions were born
Mhm.
out of Christianity, some of them, you know, but
Yeah.
that was always, well, religions do this, and religions do that, for
Mhm.
the sake of being this, and the sake of being that.
Mhm.
It's not,
Yeah.
that's just man's will. That's
Yeah.
not-
Very often what happens is people conflate religion with God, and they say, well, I don't believe in God because I hate religion, or I hate religious systems and things. Think about what the Crusaders did. You're going to call yourself a Christian? I don't believe in a God that could. Well, that's not the true God. That's not the true and living God that was doing those things or driving those people to do that. They were misinformed. They misunderstood, and they were dealing with everything that was involved in their specific situation, and that's what they thought was relationship with God. But that has nothing to do with the fact that the real, true, supreme creator exists and is. Does that make sense? Yeah, Sebi.
Well, when you were bringing up, like, why would they acknowledge it?
Mhm.
I think for a lot of people in this country, it's because I think a lot of our laws and how we formed the country was based off of a theistic view, and so,
Mhm.
and they don't like a lot of that, and so it's like it does affect them.
Yeah.
In that, like, in a roundabout way, and so
Mm.
that's why they might want to address it.
Yeah, well, that comes. It's cyclical. It comes back to the fact that they're addressing it because they're not happy with how it has impacted their worldview and their existence, and so they have to. Again, it doesn't change anything for them to make these arguments. They're not in political circles changing the Declaration of Independence. They're having a conversation with a person that believes in God and trying to convince them that he does not, because they're frustrated about how their situation or their interaction with God's stuff has played out. But it's irrelevant to the fact that God exists. Does that make sense? Yes.
I noticed this kind of argument, especially when it comes to the entertainment and Hollywood and all
Mm.
this.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of this industry is atheist, and
Uh-huh.
but I always find very curious why they spend so many money, so many time,
Mm-hmm.
so many projects and movies
Yeah.
and series that antagonize especially Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And I always ask myself, like why do they spend so much money on something
Mhm.
to mock something they don't believe exists?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What's up,
Yeah,
Miss?
yeah, they can't make fun of Buddha or Muhammad because there's a whole lot, bro.
Uh-huh. Yeah, well, that's the it's kind of a catch-22. God chose to reveal himself in the person of Jesus Christ and make himself personable so that we could relate to him. And what twisted creation does is they mock him and they make fun of him because he's supposed to be our walking representation of God. So see how that he opened himself up to that. God actually knew the ridicule that would come, and even though it's just a foolish movie or whatever, God recognized that he was going to open himself up to people that were going to mock the concept and idea of him, even though in actuality he was doing the most loving, incredible, like amazing, words can't even comprehend the incarnation of Christ. God laying down his glory. We talked about this last week. Like God laying down his glory to become like us, right?
It's like no matter what he said or did, it would have turned him away and it doesn't matter.
Well, ultimately, what we're going to come to at the end of this whole conversation is what is really the purpose for us understanding these things, and what is the agenda behind the opposite of these things. What is really the agenda behind secular evolution? What is really the agenda behind atheistic thought and secular humanism? Are these just people just being people and they just want to think this way? I don't believe that, and we're going to address that. That's going to be the culmination of the class. Yes, Ricardo.
Okay, so from what I get from the word is from the beginning God created man,
Mhm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
When God created them with a vacuum to know God, to worship God,
Mhm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So these atheists that say they do not believe God,
Let me get into that. You're going to Romans, right? It's actually in my notes.
actually.
Okay.
Never mind.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna get there. It's not. That's for naturalistic evolution. Let me get there, dude. You're always in my notes, man. Come on, dude. All right, we'll move on. That is the ontological argument from highest ideal. God is that highest ideal, okay? Second one. Oh, man, we're not going to get out of these, are we? Okay, second one. Teleological argument from design. Okay, let me go to the next one. How do I go to the next one? Oh, that's so blurry. Ugh. Teleological argument from design. Well, if you can read blurry shapes, then I guess that will help you. Teleological argument from design. Teleological, argument from design. And the teleological argument comes from the word telos, and that means purpose or design. Telos means purpose or design. I was really hoping this was going to be clear. Don't strain your eyes trying to read it. I'll give you all the information that's in it. And this seeks to convince about God from the amazing harmony in all of creation. Has anybody ever used that argument when you're trying to explain to someone God exists? Look at the creation around you. Look at the human body. It's so incredible. It's called the teleological argument from design. You guys are scholars and you didn't even know it. Because we look at the intelligence that it put to create what we see now, that there was design, then it proves that there must be a designer. In its simplest form, the argument contends that when we see something that is designed, we rightly assume that an intelligent designer created it. Further, the more complicated something is, the more intelligent the designer must have been. When you think about as much as science can try to quantify all of our existence, some things just fall short. Science has an inability. There's an inability, a lacking of words and numbers and figures that can accurately quantify some things, distances in space and the galaxy, weights and all kinds of these incredibly innumerable, completely ununderstandable concepts. It speaks to a God who is greater than those things, more ununderstandable, more intricate and complex. Does that make sense? We get the answer to these. We get these arguments from Psalm chapter 19. So let's go there and let's read that one real quick and see what it says. Psalm 19. Come on, hold on. Let me get there now. Hold on. You see, the crazy thing is you guys know all these things. You've used all this stuff before. You just didn't have the names put to it. And so that's what I'm trying to give you tonight, okay? Psalm 19. Hope I quoted the right one here. Psalm 19. Here we go. Psalm 19, verse 1. The heavens declare the glory of God. The sky displays his handiwork. Day after day it speaks out. Night after night it reveals his greatness. There is no actual speech or word, nor its voice heard literally, yet its voice echoes throughout the earth, its words carried to the distant horizon in the sky. He has pitched a tent for the sun. It's like when you look at the creation around you, you know for a fact, even though the creation doesn't say, hey, look, God exists, it's like you hear it echoing in your mind. Look at this. Look at the mountain. Look at the stars. Look at the sun and the moon and look at these things. This is the argument that you are formulating in your mind. Look at the design around you. Can you tell me that it wasn't created by an intelligent designer? Teleological argument from design. Another one, Ricardo, if you have it, Romans chapter 1, verse 20. Can you read that for me, buddy?
Romans 1,
20.
20.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want in King James?
Whichever. Let's see what the Lord wants to do.
King James.
Okay.
Romans 1:20.
Mm-hmm.
For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse.
Amen. This is the picture that we understand as you look at the unspeakable glories of creation. It speaks to someone who has unspeakable glory. Does that make sense? And then, Miss Anna, do you have Psalm 139, verses 13 and 14? Can you read that one?
Verses 14.
13 and 14.
For you created my innermost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well.
as you look at even your own, as we study the human body, as we look at, man, I loved when Vanessa was pregnant, I loved going online and seeing those like pictures of the, like all the little videos of the stages. Oh, you're right there, huh? Yeah, the stages of the baby in the womb, and like now her little eyes are opening and blinking.
Do that, but God,
Hey,
you know?
well, I agree with you. I totally agree with you.
It is written,
It,
the human eye has over 2 million moving parts.
that's another huge part of arguments that of examples of the teleological argument when doctors when doctors consider and study the human body as it exists, and they begin to get into the processes of conversion of calories for energy, and how the body grows through all these like you're just like this incredibly crafted, wonderfully made, intelligently designed little machine, and some of the little machines go, no, I just formed this way. I just formed this way. God himself uses this teleological reasoning in the beginning of the book of Job. In the beginning of Job chapter 38, God answers Job with 64 questions about design and creation, including, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. As an aside, God's questioning of Job was God seeking in love to bring Job to the understanding that just as God had a purposeful design for his creation, so too he had a purposeful design for his mind, in his mind for Job's suffering. So we take this from just a literal and practical, understanding of, us existing, but then you can turn it to, you can turn and draw a spiritual principle from it. If God is able to craft and design things perfectly, physically, then imagine and understand that he's also crafting things spiritually and emotionally that are in and around you, stuff that's happening, and you should look at that thing and go, oh, your ways are above my ways. I can't comprehend all that you're trying to spiritually and emotionally do and bring, but what I can do is just confess that you are good, you are working, and yield yourself to his creatorness, his godness, if that makes sense. Okay?
You were just reading Job, right?
Job 38. Okay? If you want a lot of this stuff, I drew tons of this stuff from that book I told you on Sunday, the Mark Driscoll book, Doctrine. It's all about Jesus. It's like, dude, it's just so simple, so easy the way he puts things. So I encourage you, get that, and you'll find tons of good stuff. Doctrine.
Is in this book?
All in this book, okay? The next one. And there's another kind of divergence of this, iteration of this argument, teleological argument from design. It's called the argument of fine-tuning from design. And it says, like, have you guys ever thought of the fact that the sun is the exact distance away from the earth that it needs to be so that we don't burn up or are not freezing cold? The exactness of certain gravitational laws, the exactness of certain scientific laws and things that have to be exactly right in their measurements, or everything would not exist in order. And there's countless numbers of them. It's not like one of the things. It's like all of the things. If the sun were any bigger than it is, like, we burn up. If it were any smaller, we'd be too cold. If the moon sat any closer, it's like over and over. There's this like fine tuning to all of the creation. It's more than it's just created. It's created perfectly. Perfectly. That's why, I love the guy. I think he's a genius, smarter than I'll ever be. But I think,
What's his name?
oh man, let me cut the audio. I'm just kidding. I think God gave us the earth for a reason, because it's what he prepared for us to use and to be blessed and to live on. And I don't think in any of our lifetimes, I don't think in any lifetime coming soon, I hold that not before the Lord himself comes back to take us home, that the earth is going to give out on us, because I believe that God designed it for us. So I think all of these, leaps and expenses to try to go to other planets to some degree are a bit Tower of Babel-esque. You're trying to reach into the heavens, and is that really what God wants you to do? Shouldn't you just love God, love people, and serve in the earth? All right. I made it through that without saying a name. All right, here we go. That's just a personal opinion there. When you look from the perspective of a scientist at the universe, it looks as if it knew humans were coming, an atheist said. It's like, come on. There are 15 constants, the gravitational constant, various constants about the strong and weak nuclear forces, I talked about that on Sunday, that have precise values. If any of these constants were off by even 1 part in a million, or some case by 1 part in a million, the universe could not have actually come to the point where we see it now. Matter would not be able to coalesce. There would have been no galaxy, no stars, no planets, no people. And so you see a watch, and you don't go, wow, dude, this watch must have just formed out of nothing. No, you look at the intricate design of a watch, and you go, who is the watchmaker? We don't walk up to buildings and go, man, this building just popped out of the thin air. We look for who? The architect, right? Someone had to architect it. Okay. Keep going. Cosmological argument from first cause. Okay, this comes from the word cosmos, and it has to do with orderly arrangement. You guys have been seeing this word a lot. Cosmology, cosmos. Okay, orderly arrangement, the way things are ordered. 6th century BC, a philosopher named Pythagoras. You guys know him, Pythagoreans. Theorem. Okay, you were close enough to school to know that. All right, that's why. Pythagorean's theorem, the argument, he's also came up with this. The argument from first cause asserts that every effect, there has to be a cause. Does that make sense? So if something has happened, then there has to be something that caused it to happen. Because of the material of the universe, because the material of the universe had to have a beginning, the material, hold on, someone sent me something. Something must have caused the material to exist. And so this is very often where secular science will go back and say, yeah, we believe in the Big Bang theory, but well, what about all the stuff, all the particles that came together and exploded outward? What do you believe about those? Well, they just eternally existed. So we believe the first thing that happened, the effect that took place was the Big Bang, but all the stuff that it affected, we believe that was always there. And this is where you begin to get into the breakdowns in the naturalistic understanding of how things came to be. They take it only so far, but the moment that they are out of reasons or words that they can use to define and explain something, they have to take these huge steps of faith. Okay, so you'll believe that the universe is eternal, but you won't just believe in an eternal creator who made everything. Does that make sense? We're going to see that as we get to the process.
At the same time, they can see, they'll admit now that you can't create or destroy matter.
Oh.
But then where did it come from?
Then where did it come from? And then you get into these cycles. And I'm also going to talk about this at the end. Very often, these are not the arguments that win people to Christ. These are not the arguments that get people to follow the Lord. It's not like I don't believe you reason people into the faith. It's the Son of Man who draws all men unto himself. So you teach about Jesus. You teach them about his love and his grace and his mercy. If you want to pepper a few of these things in there to break down some walls and open a door, go for it. But I don't ever rely on this stuff to convince people about who God is, okay? The uncaused cause outside of the material is God. It takes 2 forms usually, and it's usually all things exist contingent upon something. Oh, I didn't move the thing over, did I? Hold on. All right, let's hope this next one is a little better. Let's see if this is better. Maybe. Is that? That's a little better. Okay. Okay. The uncaused cause is God. Takes 2 forms. Above, something outside must have created, and then all things exist contingent upon something else. So it's kind of a 2-part argument. And this is the concept that there has to be something set the things in motion so that they are the way that they are. It cannot be the result of random occurrences that just make things happen. An example, this guy named Fred Hoyle, he said, the probability of life arising on Earth by purely natural means without special divine aid is less than the probability that a flight-worthy Boeing 747 should be assembled by a hurricane blowing through a junkyard. Or have you ever heard of... It would never happen. It would never happen. And, oh, a tornado just blew through the junkyard, and now I've got a 57 pickup. No, you don't. No, it doesn't. Or the concept that 10,000 monkeys banging on 10,000 typewriters for 10,000 years. Would they ever produce Shakespeare? Of course not. Because order doesn't come from chaos. That's not how it works. Only God, who brings disorder into chaos, is able to do this. This is not a natural movement of matter and states of things. They don't naturally move from disorder to order. Something has to perpetuate that. And that's where this argument comes from, okay? Okay.
Who said the thing about the hurricane?
His name is Fred Hoyle.
That's the name of the book, right? Tornado in a Junkyard.
Tornado in a Junkyard, yeah. Fred Hoyle. Okay. The next one, this is another two-parter. There was another philosopher, his name was Kalam, and he came up with another form of the cosmological argument, but he did it from the space of time. So it's called Kalam's cosmological argument from time. And the basic Kalam argument is that the existence of time necessitates a beginning as a reference point from which time proceeds. So I used this one on a Sunday morning when I said, how do you know that I'm 27 years old? How do you know that? Well, you know that I'm wrong because you guys know I was born in February 11th in 1990, right? You guys know that. So you know that I'm actually 28 years old. The reference point from which something began would have to be outside of time. That eternal reference point is God himself, who is outside of time, so he is thus the one who initiated time. To put it in another way, the universe is not eternal, and neither is the matter in it, and therefore must have a beginning. Behind that beginning must be a cause that is eternal or apart from time. Therefore, the cause of time and of creation is God. So this argument, it's got its faults, it's got its kind of issues with it, and it's not really meant to bring people to the understanding of an intelligent designer or creator. It's just to bring people to the thought of a creator, because something has to exist outside. Something has to pre-exist all of the stuff that exists now, but it doesn't necessarily say that it was intelligent. It just says something before. So it's not a great argument to use, but okay, the next one. A question? Good? Okay. Question?
Yeah, what did you call that one?
That's Kalam's cosmological argument from time. K-A-L-A-M, cosmological argument from time. Okay? And we're moving pretty good here. We're doing great. Okay, the fourth one is going to be the axiological argument from morality. Okay? Axis means to judge. And it was formalized by Immanuel Kant. You guys might have heard of him. And it stands upon the idea that everybody, no matter where you are or who you are, you know right from wrong. Unless you have something incorrect in your chemistry or your brain, you have a sense and an understanding of right. Oh, sorry, thank you. Okay. Argument from moral. Let's say argument. Or no, argument. Okay. These things. So it doesn't matter where you go, and this you've probably used this argument at some point in your Christianity too. Is it wrong to kill somebody? Of course it's wrong to kill somebody. Well, how do you know that? Well, because someone is the moral axis, the moral judge that decides what is right and wrong, and inside of his creation, he has placed that designation in them as well. Does that make sense? So everybody, no matter who you are, where you are, and then people like to bring up, well, in this tribe in the middle of there, they hold that they don't believe that way. Internally, everybody knows right from wrong. Again, a very generalized concept, but it works generally well, I think. For the most part, people know right from wrong. And that is based upon a perfect and exact moral standard of right and wrong. And this view, the axiological argument for morality, says that God is the one who sets the moral compass inside of man. Okay? And I'll read some of these guys' words. Again, the majority of this stuff is right out of that doctrine book. I encourage you can get all this stuff right in there, okay? Authors Phillips and Brown offer the following insight into human morality. By what standard are such judgments made? Why do we believe we are answerable to some moral standard or some moral being for our behavior? Who imposed this standard on us? Those who hold to the biblical worldview in their theism, which is what we're looking at, believe the Creator, God of the universe, has given mankind an obligation to meet up to certain behavioral standards that are a reflection of His high and holy character. Morality is an intensely personal matter, and thus only a personality could have imposed such a standard. Yes?
What about animals? I mean, animals show compassion
Mm.
and empathy.
Mhm.
Some animals do.
Uh-huh.
Do you think that also testifies to?
The question is, do animals, sorry for the people online, the question is, do animals have some understanding of morality?
Is that another example?
I would say, do animals have judges and court systems? They may come up with some very primitive tribal retribution for behavior that is detrimental to the well-being of the group or troop or clan or whatever they choose. But I don't feel that in any way, shape, or form an animal comes even close to the... Yeah?
That's not what I was saying.
What are you saying?
I'm saying, do you think that's evidence of like a God-given moral that even animals show compassion? Like, where do they get that from? Some animals grieve their dead. Like, that seems like it's an argument for that. You know?
Seems like it's an argument for that.
Like a chimpanzee, right?
Uh-huh. You're thinking elephants more, right?
The animal, right?
There's a lot of different.
Which one?
Sure.
Chimpanzee or an animal? Elephant?
Both.
Both, right? No,
Mhm.
like if I was a chimpanzee and I lost
Oh, Jesus.
some tiger ate my baby,
Uh,
and as a chimpanzee, I probably went for it.
uh-huh.
Is that what you're saying, bro?
Yeah, I'm saying it seems like that's even evidence of God also, that some animals exhibit that. Almost a morality.
Okay, so as we get...
I think animals have emotions, but I don't believe they have the moral conscience that human people do.
Not the same, but some maybe.
So I would say this. There is a level, and now you start to get into something else, and this begins to come into different evolutionary questions and things like that. But what are our emotions for the most part? What are our emotions? Emotions are reactions chemically in our bodies. I think animals can have chemical reactions.
Absolutely. Sure.
Why do cats purr?
That's a question of the night. Why do cats purr? Right. Okay. So I don't, and yeah, I believe, something like that. Like I believe, like a cat purrs because they're getting a release of whatever cat dopamine is or whatever. It feels good to them, right? Yeah. There's some, and then you're also like, was it Pavlov's bell, right? So there's a chemical response that's being built into. And I would say that the biologist in the room probably has more to say about this than me. But, I would imagine that there are chemical reactions that are being conditioned into specific animals, and that is through their existence, through their life, that are somewhat natural and not spiritual or moral. They're just reactions in their chemical, their makeup chemically. But, I mean, I'm not against it. I mean, if you want to hit someone with that, go for it. I'm not going to tell you no,
I watched a documentary
Uh-huh.
of like hyenas and
Uh-huh.
lions fighting.
Uh-huh.
And according to the documentary, they show actually like a hyena killing like a lion cub.
Uh-huh.
And the lions just for revenge went to kill the babies
Yeah.
of the hyenas.
Yeah.
So does that kind of like show some moral thoughts? Like,
I don't know does it show more? Those are questions. Does that show? So he's talking about, he watched a documentary where hyenas killed a lion's cub, and the lions went back for revenge, right?
Yeah, they want to get the hyenas. baby.
Okay, and they went to get the hyena's baby. I heard a similar story about like an elephant that had started to like destroy villages, or a tiger or something like that that had started to destroy villages after its cub was hunted or something like that. In India, yeah. Again, I'm not giving definitive answers on any of these things. I'm just here to put the arguments to you. I believe much of those things are nature instead of like spiritual. The specific word I want to use is intentional, processed. I'm sitting here reasoning and thinking that thing killed my baby. I'm gonna go get revenge on this thing.
So it's instinct.
I would say some level of instinct.
Can I say something?
Please, I want you to.
So, I am familiar with documentaries.
If you tell me that you knew a tiger that killed, I'm just kidding.
What I've known about documentaries and how they shoot them, they're stories that are crafted. So when they go and shoot, like they grab a ton of footage of all of these interactions that they get, and then someone is crafting a story.
Are you telling me right now that the story of the elephants that adopted the baby elephant and brought it into the pack is not true? Don't you?
They did their thing, but they craft a story when they're
It's like
in.
Yeah.
they go in with a concept.
So
Yeah.
and that's what they
documentaries are
wanna
entertainment
present,
as well.
yeah.
They're
Okay.
not just
Well,
showing you what they shot.
Okay.
I will tell you,
Yes.
in my previous career,
Mm-hmm.
I have,
Where are we right now, guys? What's happening? What are we talking about? Go ahead, Miss Anna. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
The only emotion you see in those animals is sadness from the abuse. But you don't see any kind of like remorse or anything that they had to kill other animals.
Yeah.
It's not there.
Yeah.
You know?
So are you saying that they are exhibiting some form of moral?
They're not.
They're not. You're saying that they're not. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's sadness. You can see the sadness, but mostly it's because they're being starved and they're being mistreated, so they would be vicious.
Mm-hmm.
But them killing another dog or the roosters killing other roosters, you don't see. I've never seen any evidence of.
Yeah, and I think
moral.
And I think what you get into is you begin to go very anecdotal. I heard a story about this, or I saw this document, I saw this thing, and it's like, okay. And I get it, we're talking about morality, which is, relative, it's very subjective, right? But there is also chemical processes that are engaged in the process of, basic emotion, happiness and sadness and worry and anxiety. And so I think all those things have to play, but the axiological argument has to do with morality, mostly as it deals with people, okay? Really, as it deals with people. Yes?
So the argument for moral law, is that the same as moral government teaching, or is that something different?
What do you mean moral government?
That you're born without sin until you sin. That's moral government. That you're just, you become a sinner as you live life.
Is that from a biblical standpoint?
Biblical point from Romans chapter 5. If you listen to Romans chapter 5 by Chuck Smith.
Yeah.
Romans 5:12.
Okay.
It comes off breaking down moral government.
Mm-hmm.
And moral government is just saying that people, they're good people. You're a good a person until you start to sin. An example is like a horse thief, right?
Mm-hmm.
A horse thief, he's always been a horse thief. That's why he stole the horse, right?
Okay.
You get what I'm saying? Like,
Trying to track here.
I'm a sinner, not because I sin, but I'm a sinner because I sin because I'm a sinner. You know what I'm saying? You ever heard of that?
No, I'm trying to
Okay, you know what?
I
Never
saved
mind.
that
I'll get
quote.
back to you
I
on
know
that.
exactly.
I'm trying to think of it.
You know what you're reminding me of, Ricardo, if you think about it? On the books of laws, municipal laws and stuff, they used to have a lot of moral laws that people had to live by, and if they violated those, they went to jail.
Well, let me. This all plays into a bigger picture as we get away from these. As we try to As our civilization moves further away from these arguments about the existence of God, we seem to move further into decivilization and unhumanness. That's ultimately what the point of us talking about these things is. As we desire to move away from the argument of moral law and understanding that we are inherently built with a moral compass inside of us, it gives us liberty to, well, he's a serial killer because we don't have moral law. That's just how he interprets it. And it gives a freedom to a sinful people to be able to do what they want as they move further away from the arguments that justify the existence of God. Does that make sense? Exactly. We're going to get into all of these, but we got to actually get past these. Let's do dolphins hunt impacts. All right, here we go. Yes. Last one, Robert. Yes.
Okay, but we believe that God can touch an animal's heart and make the animal move in a certain way, right?
Yeah, duh, Balaam.
Yeah. So.
But when you say the word touch an animal's heart, I feel like that's a very loose word. That's a very.
Our dog, my brother with Down syndrome, and he knew how to get to my grandmother's house.
Mm-hmm.
But he would take off from the house, and the dog would run around him, and he'd run back to knock on the door, and then go after him and run around.
But we're talking about training, right? We're talking.
Nobody trained him to do that. He just did it.
Yeah,
Because they're smart.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
why was that?
All right. I can't. All right.
Apologize again for
Exit. Russ is like, okay, but back to the elephants.
No, we should talk about animals.
Here we go. All right. Here we go.
But another class.
Before we know God, we attest to his existence when we say we have been wronged or have done wrong. Santiago, he knows when he has done wrong. He hides. He tries to cover it up. And no one taught him to do that. He does that in himself. And when he began to do that, it was a very clear picture to me. Inside of him is a moral compass. He knows right and wrong. He knows when he is disobeying. And then you come into questions about nature and nurture and all those things. But I wholeheartedly believe, God, there I go again. I don't know why I keep saying that. That, yes, it's built into us. So that's the axiological argument from morality. Okay, so there's a few other arguments, and we won't get into them because Russ with our lions and hyenas. I'm just kidding. Oh, cool. Thanks, Ederson. All right, cool. There's another one, the argument from religious experience, which is why do humans worship? People all over the world build unto themselves these understandings of God and worship and different forms of it. They create idols. Why is that? Because something, a God has been created in their hearts, and so they continually run to it, whether they recognize the reality of who it is or not, or they run from it, okay? And then there's the argument of consciousness, and this is kind of getting into chemicals and things like that. How can man, being material, give rise to conscious thought and bow and worship? These two arguments are very compelling and forceful for the existence of a supreme being, God, the living God, okay? All right, so we've moved through the theistic standpoints of why we believe in a creator. Whether we believe all those things or not, we hold some understanding of all those things. There's common morality built into mankind. The creation itself had to have a starting point. Someone had to start it who was outside of it, because you can't start something while you're subject to it. What were the other ones? It had to have a first cause. The teleological argument from design. We look at all of creation, we look at everything around us, and you can very clearly see that there is an intelligent designer and architect behind it. And then, highest ideal, the fact that we create God no matter who, whether we hate him. I don't know one person who has no concept of God. Everybody has a concept of God, whether they deny him, they know and understand, thus he must exist. Okay, so here we go. Now we can move to the creationist and theist arguments for how creation is ordered and came into existence. We'll deal with the strictly creationist, biblically acceptable ones first, because we covered them also yesterday. So we're going to move quickly through these, okay? So I will preface this as we get into these different views. I'm going to be giving general concepts of all of these schools of belief and understanding. So please, 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 please do not pigeonhole anybody that you know hold these views, because there are all kinds of different nuances to how people hold this stuff, okay? So like I said, there are 4 topics that we use to identify which creationist view the theist holds. One of them is the age of the earth. The second one is the age of humanity. The third one is the mechanism of creation. And the fourth one is the meaning of days. Okay, I see you guys all looking up at the picture. I'll explain what it is. These are life or creation orchards about how things could have possibly formulated from a theistic evolution viewpoint, looking at that blue line, that is flood. And so there were things created, and then the flood came. And then a common argument against evolution is, well, you couldn't get this diversity if you had wiped out all of the animals. It's very possible to have gotten that. So this is what this came from. I just thought it was a really cool graphic I'd never seen before. So let's get into the creationist viewpoints. And I know I ran through them on Sunday, but I want you guys to kind of get some understanding of which one of these views you guys hold and how you interpret some of this stuff. So the first one is the historic old earth, young humanity creationism. Historic old earth, young humanity creationism. Okay? So the word used for beginning in Genesis 1:1 is Bereshith in Hebrew, which marks a starting point for what came afterwards. Now, let me say this. We do not believe these who hold this theory, who hold this viewpoint. I am one who holds this historic old earth, young humanity, that there is a gap or a gap between verses 1 and 2. Now, a distance of time, yes, but not gap, because what gap turns into is gap theory. And I'm going to explain to you why I do not believe gap theory is correct or right biblical teaching, okay? Rather, verse 1 begins the Genesis story telling us that the God who created everything is the same God who creates his image bearers and the promised land where he will live with them. What God created in the first verse existed for an undefined period of time, and it was unformed, but it was created, and that could be anywhere from a moment to 1 billion years. Could have been anywhere from a moment to 4 billion years, anything. Before God began the work of preparing and ordering the uninhabitable land for mankind as his habitation. The preparation of the uncultivated land and the creation of the first human beings, Adam and Eve, occurred in 6 literal 24-hour days of Genesis by the hand of God. This is what these people who hold this view believe. So, yeah, please.
When you say that there was a measure of time between the creation and mankind, but then when it began in 6 literal days, I don't understand
So Genesis 1:1 says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." So there was, and this is again, now you start getting to some hard philosophical ideas. How do you define nothing? Nothing is something. Like when you say nothing, it's something. Nothing. How do you can't quantify or put a name to nothing, because you have to come up with something in your mind that is. Does that make sense? And it's like metaphysical and weird, but the concept of nothing is that there was no earth, no heavens, no time, no space, no matter, no nothing. And then in a moment, God created the heavens and the earth. He spoke, and everything that is existed. Cosmos could be included in that. Maybe not specifically our sun and moon, but maybe. Then what you have is an undefined period of time.
Okay, so stop there.
Please.
And then you say that began in 6 literal days. So
No, not began. So after the creation of heavens and earth, the unordered thing existence, some amount of time passed, whatever you decide that is, according to your interpretation of the Bible, and then as God began to order the earth, specifically his creation, That happened in 6 days, and that's what we looked at on Sunday. 6 literal 24-hour periods of creation. Yes?
On this one, what always throws me is 2 Peter 3:8.
Okay.
Where it says, "But beloved, do not forget this one thing, that with the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is 1 day." And then going back into Psalm 94, chapter 90, verse 4, where he says, "For 1,000 years in your sight are like yesterday's when it is past, and like a watch in the night." So is that just maybe like a quick reference?
Okay. And then here we go. This is where reading the Bible without our presuppositions is valuable, because we look at days of creation and we go, well, that's 6 days. That's like 6,000 years according to those verses. It's not what that is saying. That's what we read into it. It could mean that, but that's not necessarily what that's saying. And we do that all over the Bible. Like we do that because we have this concept built into our mind that, a day is as 1,000 to the Lord, and 1,000 is as a day. And so whenever we find days or epochs of time, we like to try to plug those numbers to see if that theory works. Well, maybe it's like 6,000. Maybe it's like 5,000. Maybe it's like 7,000. I mean, if it's 6,000, dude, that means if it's coming to completion at 7 years, then we're about to, like, Jesus is coming back soon. That would be in 500 more years or something like that. That's the danger of doing that, when you begin to, like, plug in concepts to things that don't necessarily connect to each other. Not to say that it's not true, but we don't know.
Would it have anything to do with, like, the reason I say not metaphor, but there's a type of writing that escapes my mind. But
Poetic?
Poetic, yes, but there is, the Lord 1 day is as that particular section of the form of writing. Does that have any hold within how it was written?
Well, he's writing in Greek, so I don't know. I would have to look into that. I don't know. But you're getting Greek in Peter, and then you're getting Hebrew in the book of Psalms. So those are two completely different languages dealing with seemingly the same words. And I'm sure Peter was playing on what he read, what he would have known in the Psalms. But he had, I'm sure, a deeper working use of the two languages than I have, or any of us have. So again, that's a good study one. I would say for you, that's a study one. I don't have an answer. I don't hold that as 6 days, 6,000 years. Because there are people that interpret the Bible and say 6 days is 6,000 years. You look on that young earth map, it's about 6,000 years. That's how you can conflate all kinds of things, and you're not necessarily wrong, but I cannot sit here and definitively say yes or no.
Would it have anything to do with the tribulation period?
Not getting into that today. That's another thing. We actually have to finish tonight, okay? Yes.
First Peter 3:8, and then Psalm 90, verse
In time, man. We're going to get there. You looking at me all crazy, though, man. We're going to get there. All right, what? All right. So, any other questions about this historic old earth, young humanity creationism? Let me just tell you, if you want to be biblically correct, you're going to believe this. Okay, anyways. Just kidding. All right, view 2. Young earth, young humanity creationism. Okay, so in this view, God created the entire universe, including Adam and Eve, in 6 literal 24-hour days. So it seeks to be as faithful to its reading of the biblical text. This view affirms that the entire universe, is less than 10,000 years old. So basically, this is very common in what is taught in homeschool curriculums, okay? This is probably what my son is being taught in his homeschool curriculum. And somewhere in this time frame, there's probably dinosaurs. Dinosaurs probably get brought up in this one a lot. And let me say this. Adam wrote a dinosaur. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. This is a totally acceptable, okay, biblical interpretation of the events of Genesis. It's not wrong. I can't say that it's wrong. It changes the difference from when God in the beginning when God created the heavens and the earth, and then the next 25 verses of chapter 2, it slams all of that into 6 literal days. That's all. Instead of putting a a difference of time in between in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and then the starting and forming. It treats it all as the same creating. And so he spoke, and then he began to order 6 literal 24-hour periods. And the big, rub on the 24-hour periods is because in the account of Genesis, it says there was night and there was day. So that's why a lot of people hold that they were 24-hour periods, because if it's night and day, that's what the Lord is trying to get across. That's what I hold, but there are people that don't interpret that literally. They just say night and day is another symbol, okay? Yes.
So does the Hebrew translation of night and day
Uh-huh.
tell you that it's a 24-hour period?
No, but we understand, but the Hebrews drew the way that they operate a night and a day, like a full 24-hour period, off of that. Remember, when do Hebrews begin their day? In the evening, and it goes until sundown. From sundown to sun up. That's how they calculate their day. So it seems that they give some credence to it. That's what I would see. Okay? It interprets the data of science in terms of inspired scripture, and where it can begin to fall short is anywhere that science begins to go against or see differently what the scriptures may be saying. It's refuted. Science, don't tell me anything. I know 10,000 years, the Bible says this, 6 literal days, everything else I don't want to hear. It's a very safe view because it doesn't allow much in, but I think it can be a bit narrow-minded. I know that's a very trigger word for some of us. Narrow-minded, because I think that there is, like I said, it's an ancient text that God is constantly revealing to us. And so, okay, third one. Old earth, what? Oh my goodness. Dude, oh my goodness. Third, old earth creation or intelligent design. The days of Genesis, so this is view number 3. The days of Genesis 1 are just analogies of God's work days, setting a pattern for our rhythm of work and rest. They are understood in the same sense that as in that day of the language of Isaiah chapter 11, 10 through 11. I think this might be kind of what you're talking about, Maddie, because they're seeing these days as analogies and not literal 24-hour periods. They represent periods of God's historical supernatural activity in preparing and populating the earth as a place for humans to live, love, work, and worship. These days are broadly consecutive periods of indiscriminate length from a human standpoint. The biblical difficulty is that days and evenings, again, they have that's a 24-hour period, a day and a night.
What was this view again?
This is called old earth creation or intelligent design, but this is not evolution. This is not evolution. So theistic evolution. We're going to get to that next, okay? So yeah, when you do that, and okay, so there's one that we won't go over, and then our fourth view is going to bump us into the end of our conversation. Is the interpretive poetic creationism view. And like I said on Sunday, this is a very dangerous view. You can make it work in your theology if you'd like, but it's dangerous because what it does is it basically says the whole creation account is poetic, is interpretive. It's symbolic. You can plug things in according to how you see them in different parts of Scripture, and it gets messy. When you don't interpret the Bible literally, like as the first step, you run the chance of seeing all kinds of things, and that's dangerous. You can make it say whatever you want. You can make it say anything. And so I encourage you, although you can make this work, try to avoid it or really do your diligence cross-scripturally to make sure but see, it's like you decide what scriptures are you going to pick. You're not going to get them all, and so just be careful with this one. The fourth one, which will kind of get us launched into the end of our time, is evolutionary creationism. Now, or theistic evolution, theological evolution. You can use all of these words, okay? So in this view, God used and planned and the purpose-driven natural process of evolution to do his creative work of the universe and life. Genesis 1 uses the 6 sequential 24-hour days of the Sabbath rhythm as a literary framework to reveal the theology of creation. The universe is a creation that is completely dependent for its continued existence on the sustaining power of the triune God and of the processes necessary for life to evolve through transitions, which would be impossible without God's involvement, culminating in humans with their incredibly complex brains and minds paired together in the full image of God's personhood. The majority of them believe, humans evolved from pre-human ancestors, and over a period of time, the image of God and human sin were gradually and mysteriously manifested. Okay, so all of this to say, so listen, very often what happens in Christian circles when you bring up evolution, you go heresy. No, we don't believe in, no. There is a very healthy, totally possible school of creationist understanding of the book of Genesis that says evolution is driven and sustained by the hand of God, and it's okay. They interpret the days as a certain number, they move through the creation events as a certain number, and they say God propelled these processes forward, and he used the process of evolution, and where it falls short, where you're missing a link or something like that, God propelled the change forward. Now, I do not hold this view. I know people that hold this view, and it's okay. I have my questions about it, but those are questions that we can have. So there is room inside of Christian theology to be an evolutionist. So don't be so narrow-minded as to think the second you hear evolution in the church, you're going to get your pitchforks and go, because that's what happens. Here we go. There's a few problematic and I would say incorrect creationist views, okay? The first one is gap creationism. You believe in gap theory, okay? Yeah, and creationism gives it more of a solid standing. I don't believe it's solid. It's a theory. It's also can be known as ruin, restoration, creationism, or gap theory. It's a form of old earth creationism that says that there were 6 creation periods as described in the book of Genesis, 24-hour day, but after God in the beginning created the heavens and the earth, and then before going to verse 2, there is a creation that had been made that was perfect, ordered, and right, and good. And where this takes a dive off of what is okay, I believe, is that it then begins to think that there was a pre-Adamic race, there was a race of people before Adam. This is possibly where the fall of Satan happened. This is possibly where he was cast down to the earth. This is possibly where he became the serpent to deceive the people. After this war, the whole earth that had been created then gets turned into this unordered state that God has to order again, beginning in verse 2. What is the problem with this? What is between verse 1 and 2 of the Bible? Of our canonical scriptures, there's nothing. So everything that you want to plug into there, it's your own assumptions. And I know people who I love who like this because it can fit some things really well, but I don't see it biblically. I would not suggest that you hold it. I would be very cautious if you do, and do your good research and make sure that you don't just listen to the people that are saying, that'll work. Do your research. What's in between verses 1 and 2 of the Bible? What's there? Nothing. Not in our canon. Not in our scripture. Okay? So, there's another form of creationism called progressive creationism. And it's the idea that God created in bursts of life to create. God created new forms of life gradually over a period of hundreds of millions of years that died, and they began to reform and died and reformed and died and reformed, and this happened in cycles. But the danger with this is that it begins to refute the biblical account that death came after the fall. Does that make sense? So this says that God gave life, and then all those creatures, some of them died and didn't make it, and then God had to give another burst, another breath of life to create more, and then some of those died and then burst, and it just kept happening. But the problem is all of this happened before the fall. And what do we see in the scripture? When does death enter mankind? And when does death enter creation? Okay, now the way that this would be refuted is that you don't believe that death, that you believe that death could have affected the animals before the fall. Do we believe that? That's a question.
They don't eat of the tree. Right?
But that goes back to Ecclesiastes 3:9, doesn't it, where it talks about both man and beast show the same fate? So would it be like when death entered man, it entered animals?
That's a question for you to have. I don't have an answer to that. So that's why I believe that death entered, because I don't believe, here's the thing. Okay, animals die, right? Isn't that like terrible? Like blood on the ground? That's not paradise. That's not Eden. That's not Adam being able to like walk up to animals and like be cool and like ride dinosaurs and stuff. I'm just kidding. That's what I do. Where's the dinosaurs?
They die because of sin.
That's a good question. Do animals die because of a fallen state, or do they die because... Well, here's the question. Wasn't it after the fall, all of the creation subjected to futility? Wouldn't animals be involved in that? Everything that is created was subjected to futility after the fall. So that's that's how you interpret these passages. So I find flaws with progressive creationism, but
What was that called?
progressive creationism. Write it down, study it later. Yes?
So where do dinosaurs fit in? And what part does the tree of life have in Adam staying alive?
I am not going to answer Eden questions until we get to an Eden Monday night class, which is probably going to be like a 4-part thing. I'm going to cut the audio on this one. I hold that dinosaurs lived in some form. I don't even want to say it out loud.
See, that's how I felt when I asked my question.
You're not sitting up here though, Anna. Like, 'cause I could get like, Pastor Richard could come get me. Like, all right, we're done. We're ending this. We're done. Just like, I believe that they existed after the beginning. I believe they existed after the beginning. That's what I hold. Okay. There's another theory that is not... Don't you have to go to work, man? What happened, dude? What happened? Here we go. Oh, no. I'm going to be getting texts all night, dude. Oh, no. Right here. Here we go.
Do you believe that dinosaurs existed between verses 1 and 2?
I said I believe that the dinosaurs existed after the beginning.
So after all the animals were
Before the 6 days.
Did I say that?
No, I'm asking.
So you're saying after...
I gave you my answer. I believe the animals existed after the beginning.
based on what the dinosaurs were created.
Of just creation?
Huh? Let me hear it. What?
Of just
Okay,
creation?
look, man, I just want to be clear on
Let me hear it. I'm trying not to be clear on it.
You said you believe that dinosaurs existed in the beginning of what?
No, after the beginning.
After the beginning of
After
what?
verse 1.
Oh, so after verse 1,
after the 6 days.
before Adam,
No.
correct? Before
He doesn't
Adam
wanna be
and Eve
specific.
were created.
I believe the dinosaurs existed after the beginning.
Okay, so that's before Adam and Eve.
If you take that as that.
I'm just saying.
All right, here we go. Go home, study it, and we can have a conversation after. All right, next one that doesn't work and is not healthy, we got to move on. Canopy theory, okay? I know that there's a lot of people that have heard this theory. Okay, canopy theory, listen to this, is a theory that around the earth, before the flood, the earth was enveloped in a watery-like canopy that did specific things to our climate, like extended the life of man because it was protecting him from solar radiation. And it added like a watery ozone, exactly. It made a very tropical, wet, very good environment for gardens and things like that to grow. Okay, all kinds of stuff. And I know people that I love that hold this idea, and it is, in my opinion, not biblical. More and more biblical scholars and environmental and scientists are dropping this view rapidly. Because they're finding that having a watery canopy around the earth would do a lot of the opposite. So God ordered things in a specific way, and it was conditions were as they should have been, but it doesn't speak about some watery canopy. It depends on how you interpret the expanse and those verses that we went through on Sunday. It would actually probably heat the earth up in an unsafe way and cause everything to die if you envelop the earth in a whole bunch of water. So there's a lot to this. And the problem is it came from a guy named Immanuel Velikovsky, who wrote some books that you've probably heard, read, Worlds in Collision. A brother actually found me a couple of copies of 2 of his books, and I brushed up on some of the stuff. And the problem is that he was a bit of a catastrophist. He believed that catastrophes are what drove the change of the earth, okay? And I don't necessarily see that. I see that God did that. God drove changes in the earth as he spoke and decided things would be. So this guy has all kinds. He's an author. I encourage you, if you're going to read his books, if you can even find them, be very cautious with them. They're very pseudo-science-y. They make a lot of things and connections to biblical stuff, like the sun standing still, the plagues coming. He gives these cosmic explanations for these things, but none of I haven't found any modern scientists that support any of his claims, and so take it or leave it. Be very careful. But I just know, especially amongst older Calvary heads, Worlds in Collision, because Chuck was a big proponent of him. He talked about him in a lot of his messages, and so you just got to be careful.
It seems like that kind of goes back to some of the ancient cosmology.
Now you're putting stuff together. It does. It does. Yeah, you're right.
Believe that wholeheartedly?
What? Do I half-heartedly believe that? Half-heartedly. Okay. Come on, we got to keep going. Okay, now let's define a few things. Can we go 20 more minutes, please? Can we go 20 more minutes? You can leave if you have to. All right, 15. That's fair. 15. Okay, I can do it at 15. Here we go. Drink coffee. It'll work. All right, bottom line is the debate about the origins of our world and life come down to whether you believe God did it and you are a theist and you are a creationist, or you don't believe that God did it. You believe it happened by natural processes. Matter, material, that's what caused it, and energy. And that means you're a naturalist, and that means you most likely hold some form of an atheistic view, a view that doesn't hold that God is the one who created things. So you fall in one of the 2 camps, atheist or theist, okay? That's it.
We're thieves.
Okay, you should be. If you're not, let's talk after, should be a theist. Okay. Some more words that are very important in understanding the naturalist standpoint are words like materialist, and that's a person that believes nothing exists apart from material things. They only believe in atoms and matter, okay? Against all these things, I have my refutations, my issues, but it's like, okay, well, what about emotions? What do you do with emotions? They're a real thing, but those aren't matter, those aren't atoms, and, humanism is another word that will often get thrown around in the naturalist perspective. Humanism, Humanism, and it's a philosophy that ties ultimate values to humans and their experience over any greater power or supernatural cause or force. So sometimes you may hear words, and secular, denoting or relation to things devoid of religion or God or similar themes. So you're going to get all these words lumped together when you begin to look up secular understandings of how things were made and created. You're going to get like secular, materialist, humanist, atheist. They're all those words grouped together because they hold the same ideologies, that God had no part in what we have now. Does that make sense? Okay. Where we go from our different views, our cosmology, the way we understand things, gets very less diverse as you move into the naturalist understanding. Although they have various processes and things like that, it all really comes down to the explaining of things that just happened due to specific chemical reactions or evolutionary processes, okay? So naturalism, associated specifically with atheism, views creation as merely the product of time, energy, and chance, okay? That's what I'm saying. There's a difference between a theistic evolutionist and a an atheist evolutionist, or a naturalist, natural evolutionist, okay? Sorry, I'm getting a little tired. Okay, who do you think is the most famous naturalist that you've ever known or heard of? Exactly, yeah, he was the father of naturalism, and he lived from 1809 to 1892. He's an English naturalist who founded the modern theory of evolution, not the theistic theory of evolution, okay? He published his proposal in 1859 in a book called On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or The Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. The lengthy original title is often shortened On the Origin of Species, both because of its length and racist overtones. So there is a bit of racism to be found because in his naturalist theories, because of the fact that he says certain races will begin to elevate over others, and he spoke about things like colonialism being a huge part of how that happens. So better civilizations and races go and dominate lesser ones so that they can rise and elevate to the top. It's part of the process. So there's a lot of problems with much of his theories and what he taught, because he does not give credence to God as the initiator or the actuator or the perpetuator of these things. Okay, now here's the thing. As Christians, we freely accept the experimentally verified fact of microevolution. Things can change according to their kind. For survival, for whatever, that's no problem. That's what this is. Things change according to their kind. You have different kinds of dogs. Not a problem. Not a problem at all. What we don't believe is macroevolution. We don't believe in this big picture that one kind of thing turns into a completely another kind of thing through natural processes. Cross species, all kinds, just completely. Now, the theological evolutionist says God can do that. God can project and move things forward along. But the naturalist evolutionist says, nope, all natural processes. That's how it happens. And this is where we're going to begin to differ in our understanding of evolution specifically.
It's like a biological change versus an adaptation.
Yeah, things can adapt and change according to their kind. But we don't believe that a bird is going to turn into that a dinosaur is going to turn into a bird. They're different things.
Fish to a man.
Or a fish to a, yeah. We get so much of that because or an ape to a man. Okay? Well, dude, you guys asked me, you guys said 15 minutes. If you want to be here for another hour, we can really talk, okay? God makes everything according to its kind, okay? Let me just make some statements about naturalistic evolution. Naturalistic evolution also supports the idea that nothing made everything. Nothing made everything. There was nothing, and then all of a sudden there was, and then it burst out and began the expansion and movement of life that we have now. But that doesn't make sense. We looked at all of those arguments. That doesn't make sense. Doesn't line up with the cosmological, doesn't line up with the ontological. It doesn't make sense. Essentially, no thing causes everything to spring into existence is what they hold. It would be perfectly fine if they would just say that it's a miracle that God created. But they won't do that. They won't name God as the force who did it, as the one who did it. And so they have to take this gigantic leap of faith. And that's where their understanding often falls short. They will take leaps into deep, dark waters instead of just recognizing that God was the initiator. There we go. Okay. Naturalistic evolution is put in... we'll keep going. Okay. So Big Bang, they believe in the Big Bang. They believe that all the materials of the Big Bang always existed, most of them, eternally. And so to get around, like, well, you pin them down to the question, well, how do you think everything got here? It couldn't have been eternal. They will usually say, well, there is an infinite number of invisible parallel universes stretching back into eternity. Dude, don't you have to go to work regardless? Yes, yes.
I don't understand. How can they say that or even know about that if it's invisible?
Brother, their own arguments fall back upon themselves. They'll lean on an invisible parallel universe, but they call themselves materialists who only believe in matter and atoms. Although you can't see those ones, they exist in
How did they find it then?
Brother, I'm not a naturalist. I don't know. I don't know.
The idea of God is far-fetched.
And this is the. It's like we become fools because we just say it was God. But they don't. They imagine that the science that they have unfinished answers to makes them smart, or it answers all the. It just creates more unanswerable questions that keep turning in on themselves. Okay. Naturalistic evolution purports that chaos made order, which is another thing that can't happen. You can't have a tornado run through a junkyard and create a Prius. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work. But that is what is being said is happening. Without any external being organizing and architecting things, they say that the processes were just moving and moving and moving. And now look at us. We drive hybrids and we have computers. All of this came from eternally existent matter that exploded outward in a chaotic, destructive, explosive force, began to tie itself in together. It's faith. You got to have faith to believe that. Okay? Naturalistic evolution purports that impersonal matter made personal humanity. Naturalists have reasoned that in addition to the material world, immaterial things such as emotions and intelligence are simply the result of impersonal, unfeeling, and unintelligent matter. I don't quite understand that. Naturalistic evolution purports to be an unbiased science, but faith beyond any evidence is still required. So they can say that they don't have faith. They can say that they don't have faith. They don't believe in faith. They don't have faith to believe in God, but they have some kind of faith. They got to have a lot of it instead of just believing in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Okay. All right. Oh, we did it. Okay, cool. Other than the argument that we are foolish for putting our faith in an invisible and all-powerful creator, the whole system of how the naturalistic, atheistic, humanist theory of evolution is confounded with the reality of God and the truth of existence. Let me wrap it up, and we can have a little discussion. If you guys want, and give us some things to take away from tonight that I just want to kind of put together. Don't waste your time arguing ontological, cosmological arguments the way that they're written down right here. Unless you find yourself in a debate with a naturalist, you're just going to waste your time. Don't write this stuff down. I would prefer you remember the Bible. It's a much better thing to learn, okay? I've rarely found that attacking the cosmology of a person who brings naturalist worldview points to the front turns out to anything valuable. It doesn't. What it turns into is what Paul talks about, just endless arguments for the sake of arguing. Well, what about this? And what about this? And then when you finally get to the end, well, what about the creation of everything? Well, let's talk about how your God parted a sea. Okay, and it never, ever gets anywhere, okay? The purpose that I want you to see in telling you these things is so that you understand the larger picture that is at hand in secular, atheistic science and many of the agendas that are pushed on atheistic evolutionary theory apart from God, and it has its effect in all kinds of areas of science. Gender, sexuality, all of these things are progressions of this atheistic secular view of how things came into existence and how they propel and move themselves forward. We believe that God is the creator and he sustains and he makes things and he does things. But if you don't hold those views and you tell people to not hold those views, then you can begin to think that you can do and become whatever you want outside of what was designed for you by the intelligent creator. This is what I want you to see. There is a more nefarious work going on behind the scenes than just a forward progression of atheistic science. It's spiritual. And it's nefarious. And I'll cut the tape later, but it's demonic. I wholeheartedly believe it's demonic and it's anti-God. It's very Tower of Babel. Let us reach into the heavens. Those aren't things for you to touch. You cannot change what man and woman is. God designed them and made them what they are. Does that make sense? But man says, I will reach into the heavens and be like God. I can decide what a man or a woman is or is not. Without God at the beginning and the end, we become less than what God created us to be. Without God, we digress in our order of creation at the hand of God into the previous day, into just animals. God created us after the animals because we're not like them. We are made in his image and likeness. But when we take him out of the picture, we just slide back down the scale. And that is another agenda, I feel, that is demonically pushed. Secularly, even though you can use very big and fancy words, that is the mode, the purpose of secular atheist thought. It's to make man beasts again. We're not beasts. We're not. Exactly. It hopes to make us into screen-addicted, un-God image-bearing beasts and animals. And that's why we have to fight against that and recognize it for what's actually happening. We can just go quietly into the night and never think about the reality of why we believe that God created the heavens and the earth. Does that make sense? If we become animals, then there is no higher calling. There's no purpose for our life. There's no purpose for the earth. And that is the humanist perspective. That's what a humanist is. There's nothing outside of just our personal experience and what we feel and what we believe. And it's dangerous. Turns us into animals. And where does this all find its home? Like I've been saying, satanic and demonic dehumanization, stripping us of the authority, the honor, and the dignity that we find as God's image bearers. When we become just this clump of cells and matter that begin to spontaneously move in directions chemically or whatever, we lose our humanity. We lose the image bearers that we are of God. Does that make sense? You're not an animal. You are not. That was something that I really tried to get across to the youth when I was teaching them at Monrovia. You're not an animal. You're not something that is just flippantly decided, like you didn't, it wasn't decided what you were and what you're going to be, and you can just fluidity and flip it around. You don't get to choose. God has a purpose for you, just like you are, the way that he created you and made you. These are the things that we have to teach to our kids. These are the things that we have to establish in them. That's what stops the flow of this gender fluidity and sexuality. That's what stops it. The Christians who become wise to these things and understand and don't just go quietly into the night. This comes from the book of Genesis. This is the importance of these. These concepts of naturalism and creationism are incredibly valid to understand and have correct opinion on because they are tied to who God made you to be. And I don't think that it is in any way, shape, or form unconnected, that we find a culture that is... are you recording me, dude? Let me cut the audio. Okay. I don't find it inconsequential or completely unconnected that we live in a society. We are a humanity now that is full of depression and hopelessness and anxiety. And let me explain the ramifications of that. It can come because you think that you are nothing more than a clump of cells that is here for a certain amount of time, and then you are going to die, and then there is nothing after that. That's hopelessness. And that's what is taught. Okay? Depression? You are just a clump of cells. You have no inherent value. You are not made in the image and likeness of a glorious God who has given you dominion over the earth, who has given you a purpose and a calling. No. You're a clump of cells. You get your 80 years and then you die. Yeah, I would be depressed and let down too. Miserable. And anxiety. You don't know when your miserable end is going to end, and when it ends, there's nothing after that. So you have nothing to look forward to. You're worried, you're anxious, you're thinking of everything that you got to get done because this is all you have. No, that's where anxiety comes. No, you've got an eternity. You just slow on down. You're going to be all right. Do the things that God has asked you to do. Those are the thoughts that you speak back when you're into those cycles of anxiety and depression and hopelessness. I am made in the image and likeness of God with a purpose and a calling. I'm not just some formation of cells. I'm thought out. He knows my sitting downs for my rising up. He has a purpose for my life. And you speak that into people's life, the truth of what God's word says about how he created us. This is why we study these things. It imbues value back into the creation. Amen? God has made us for more. We stand on the truth of what the Bible and who God says we are, image bearers created to tend the earth with purpose, awaiting the final return of us into the presence of our Creator. That's the point. That's the point of everything. So, that's all I got. Sorry. Hurry. I'm a little long. Any questions? Here we go. The homework. Oh, that's for your own personal enjoyment.
Don't bring that up when I do it.
Oh, I think that it was, I wholeheartedly believed it was an ancient cosmology playing into the Hebrews cosmology. I think it was they were drawing on pictures of the Epic of Marduk. That's what I believe. Yes.
Someone back here said something about the invisible God.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if I read it, if I dreamt it, or where I got it from.
Uh-huh.
Just to feel the invisible shield. It's talking about the invisible God. Feel the invisible shield, and you can see the angels fighting with the demons. So it's a spiritual warfare.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all invisible with everything, and that is the invisible God.
Yeah. I believe, there I go again. I believe that what we experience and what we understand as the spiritual realm is another dimension that we don't, that we aren't tuned into, that we don't have the capacities for, that sin took away our ability to partake in. But I believe that it will be restored to us, and that is what we will experience when all sin has been eradicated. We will finally be able to partake in that other dimension, I guess.
I will say, there's times when you can see it. I saw it.
This is biblical.
From my son's life.
This is biblical. The Lord has the ability. Ricardo. The Lord has... Guys, we're still talking. It's okay if you want to go, but we're still talking a little bit. So we see in the story of some of the kings, we see that God gives you ability to peer into the spiritual. He lifts the veil for a moment, and it allows you the ability to see spiritual things. That's what you get when, people see angels in the Bible. Those are spiritual beings that God is giving you the ability to see because he's pulling the veil back. And so, yeah, that stuff is going on all around. And here's the thing. You walk in the Spirit, and sometimes you become more attuned to it. You walk in the flesh, and you have no understanding that it's going on or even around you.
Amen.
So, yeah.
That's my daily prayer, to walk in the Spirit.
That's all of our prayers.
Vision is this pastoral.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, Lord.
Yeah.
That's being still in the Lord.
Yeah.
No, but the good thing is that, like, to be thankful,
Yeah.
and it's showing me where God was seeking me.
Yeah.
And coming to me.
Oh.
So it's been like this awesome awesome year.
Yeah.
Just,
Oh, praise God.
you know, purging, whatever
Yeah.
unforgiveness, it's showing me where it's been this person, that person. And it took me back to 5 years old, where God seeked me out. He
Oh,
showed me
yeah.
where I was, where he was, and I was like,
Amen.
you seek me out back then. So
That's wonderful.
This is what I'm talking about.
Praise the Lord. Amen. Yeah.
Amen.
Yes, Michael Moore.
That book by Mark Driscoll, the teleography book.
It's called Doctrines. It's all about Jesus. It's all about Jesus, and it's that the creation cosmology section is it's just a few chapters, but he's got very straightforward commentary on all the major doctrines of the Bible. All right, we're good. Questions? Any more? Huh? Alien? Dude. Hey, Genesis 6. Genesis 6. We're gonna get there. What? Nah. Genesis 6. Dude, I mean, I got my opinion on it. All right, we're good. Let me cut this off. All right. I got my opinion on it.